would be to decimate those two programs. And with this bill, they'd like to be sure that, evidently, that the states and working families don't have access to private insurance to choose the best deal for them and their families. I urge a defeat of this bill. Yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the Subcommittee Chairman of the Oversight Investigation Subcommittee, Mr. Stearns of Florida.
Mr. Stearns of Florida.
Pass unanimous consent for revising consent.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, 2 points that I've heard on the other side. One, they're talking about states' rights. It's really almost pathetic to think that they're arguing on states' rights, because really the health care bill that they're advocating and the administration is advocating forces states' government to pay for existing established exchanges. That's part of what the Secretary of Health and Human Services will do, and she'll use this money, which is unlimited to her, to force states to pay for existing established exchanges. Now, the other point, they're saying that why aren't we talking about jobs and focusing on this particular bill is not really getting us jobs. But this is focusing on spending. It's limiting spending. And with the national debt of the United States just increased by $262 billion at the start of this year, we need to handle our debt here in this country and control spending. So I'm pleased that we are taking up H.R. 1213, which would eliminate uncapped, unlimited programs in the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare. This provision grants far too much budgetary authority to the Secretary of Health and Human Services and far too little program requirements to ensure proper oversight. That's why we need to pass this bill. This is fiscal responsibility. It's physically irresponsible to argue, as they say, to give any one individual unlimited mandatory spending authority. And that's what is in the Obamacare. So I'm glad we have an opportunity to correct this legislative error. We must gain fiscal control over our government programs, starting with these exchanges, whether it's recapturing wasteful stimulus program dollars, eliminating fraud, or using the appropriation process to set budgetary priorities rather than mandatory spending. We must all exercise fiscal restraint, and that's what this bill does. Just because we followed Greece into democracy does not mean that we should follow them into bankruptcy.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from New Jersey.
I'd yield now to the gentleman from New York. 1.5 minutes to Mr. Engel.
Gentleman from New York.
I thank my friend for yielding to me, and I rise in strong opposition to this bill. You know, as Ronald Reagan used to say, there you go again. And there my Republican colleagues go again. We sat through days and days of this in the Health Subcommittee and in the Energy and Commerce Full Committee, and this is, I don't know, the third or fourth or fifth or sixth bill on the floor trying to destroy the health care bill. And I proudly support the health care bill, and I think it's time to stop scaring the American people. This is political theater. The Senate's not going to pass this. The President certainly would veto it if it passes. So all we are having is, once again, another debate about health care on the House floor again and again and again. I think my friends on the other side of the aisle have made their point. They oppose health care reforms. Okay, fine. How many times do we have to vote on it? This bill, the Affordable Health Care Act, this would repeal it, puts the American people back in charge of their health care by requiring insurance companies to be more transparent and accountable for their costs and actions. Thus, this ends many of the worst abuses by the industry and improves the quality of care. I urge my colleagues to vote against this bill.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn.
Gentlelady from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in support of the bill because this is the right step at the right time. And if you're listening to the American people, one of the things they have said loud and clear is they do not want the Obamacare bill on the books. They want this repealed. And when my colleagues say, how many times do we have to revisit this issue? Mr. Chairman, we're going to keep revisiting this issue until we get every single piece of this bill off the books, because it is too expensive, to afford. Now, a great example of this is exactly what we're dealing with, the little slice of it that gives as much as may be needed, as much as may be consumed, as much as the HHS Secretary says they will need for this unlimited slush fund to give money to the states for these grants. Now, I will remind my colleagues from across the aisle, our former Democrat governor has called this program the mother of all unfunded mandates. Now, Mr. Chairman, there's a reason that he called this program such, because he knows that putting this burden onto the states is far too expensive for the states to afford. Now, it doesn't make it right to set up a slush fund which will have no congressional oversight. The HHS Secretary can spend as much as they think is necessary, and they do not have to come back to us in Congress for this. We do not need legislation with this nebulous language. We do not need to give that authority of spending taxpayer money on this to the HHS Secretary, and it is important that we distinguish. Are we for reforming health care? There are portions of health care that need to be reformed. But what happened in Obamacare or PPACA is not health care reform. It is a movement away from patient-centered health care to government control. It is time for us to get back on the right track. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I just yield myself 15 seconds. Give myself 15 seconds. The gentlewoman I hold in a lot of respect, but it bothers me that you say that we're going to come back and keep voting and voting again on repeal, repeal, repeal. We know this isn't going to pass the Senate. When I went home the last 2 weeks, all I heard was, what are you doing to create jobs? Deal with the economy. When we deal with this and keep doing the same thing over and over again, we don't deal with jobs. I yield now to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Capps, 1.5 minutes.
Gentlelady from California.
I thank my colleague for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise in the strongest opposition to this short-sighted legislation. We all know that the only reason this bill is before us today is to try to derail the Affordable Care Act, which is already helping so many. And the exchanges this bill targets will make a clear impact, making it easier for individuals and small businesses to shop for insurance based on quality and price. They will provide the key structure to ensure the numerous consumer protections in the law are followed, and they will make the health insurance market both more competitive and more transparent. Furthermore, the exchange program gives states flexibility to build the best plan they can to meet the unique needs of their residents. But this bill would defund that, resulting in an unfunded mandate. 49 states have already received funds to begin this process. Many states are poised to move from planning to implementation. However, repeal would stop this development in its tracks. What is clear is that a vote for this bill does not reduce costs. It just shifts them onto the backs of already cash-strapped states. It means delays that CBO has noted will lead to increased costs for consumers, delays that will result in 2 million more Americans being uninsured through 2015 alone. I find it ironic that my Republican colleagues, who for so long have called for increasing a state's autonomy, are here to vote down a program that does exactly that, especially when their vote will lead to increased costs and more Americans being uninsured. So I urge my colleagues on both sides of this aisle to vote against H.R. 1213, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to a valuable member of the committee, Mr. Pompeo of Kansas.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Request permission to revise and extend my remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today in strong support of H.R. 1213, a repeal of a mandatory piece of spending inside of Obamacare that will do a great deal to not only destroy health care in America, but destroy jobs in Kansas and all across our country. I spent the last couple of weeks back in the district. I was in Greenwood and Elk and Chautauqua and Montgomery counties and in Butler and Sedgwick County, and I heard the ranking member today say that he wants us to do the people's work. I will tell you that every day I heard about people that were frightened by Obamacare. I talked to business leaders that understood that the last thing that they wanted to do was to hire a full-time employee because of the burdens and obligations that would come from this piece of legislation. I was proud at the very beginning of my time in Congress to vote to repeal the entire bill, and I am equally proud today to attempt to put back in the box this mandatory spending provision. You know, this spending provision gives, without any oversight, any restraints, the Secretary of Health and Human Services powers that are very, very large. I happen to have a special perspective on that. Today's Secretary of HHS was my governor for the last 8 years. The last thing that we want to do in health care is to give my former governor an unlimited checkbook. We have seen what that has done to Kansas. I know what that will do to the United States of America. Look, this is very clear. When we talk about health care, what we're talking about is trying to find a way to reduce costs. The absolute worst thing you can do if you're trying to reduce costs is give the government an unlimited checkbook. They will spend it. They will spend it every day. They will spend it all the time. And so I urge the strong support of 1213 so that we can stop this horrible piece of mandatory spending. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield a minute and a half to the gentlewoman from Wisconsin, Ms. Baldwin.
Gentlelady from Wisconsin.
Thank you. I thank the gentleman. Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to this Republican proposal because it will not create jobs, it will not stimulate our struggling economy, and it will not put the middle class back to work. Instead, the bill that we are considering today would take away funding for states to offer new affordable insurance options for their citizens. And this bill would lead to job loss, hindering our fragile economic recovery. Bait and switch. That's what it's called when you say one thing and do another. When you run for office promising to create jobs and bolster the economy and get elected and start doing something entirely different. Last election was about jobs and the economy, and Congress should be at the forefront. But instead of leading and putting Americans back to work, we are considering a bill to repeal funding that will create jobs and provide families and small businesses with access to affordable health care options. 48 states, including my home state of Wisconsin, have already received up to $1 million each to get health insurance exchanges up and running, including hiring key staff for implementation. In other words, this funding is creating jobs. This Republican bill raises a very important question. Are we going to ask cash-strapped states to return the money they've already been awarded? Are we going to prevent these states from receiving further funding that will create jobs? I fail to see how rescinding these dollars that will be used to create jobs is the right thing to do to get our economy back on track, and I urge my colleagues to stand up for Americans looking for work and looking for affordable health care and vote against this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just point out that this bill only rescinds monies that have not been obligated. Monies that have been obligated would not be rescinded. I'd now like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Iowa, Steve King.
Gentleman from Iowa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank the gentleman from Texas for yielding. And I also thank Dr. Burgess for the leadership role that he has taken nationally in opposition to Obamacare. His voice is essential to this and putting this unconstitutional bill behind us one day and taking us down the path of liberty and freedom with a constitutional path. I rise in strong support for H.R. 1213, Mr. Chairman, and I'd point out that much has been made of $105.5 billion in automatic spending that was written into Obamacare. That's a number that was kind of like a mirage. It was hard to pin down. And over time, and working with CRS, we produced finally that number. $105.5 billion in automatic spending written into a bill that I don't think any member of Congress, in fact, I'm certain not a single member of Congress was aware of that figure when Obamacare was passed a little over a year ago, about 13 months ago. However, this bill, H.R. 1213, doesn't address that $105.5 billion in automatic, irresponsible, unconstitutional spending. It addresses an open slot where the drafters of Obamacare just simply overlooked writing in a figure in when they granted this unlimited authority to the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius, to spend the amount of money that she sees fit to carry out the provisions of this section that is repealed by H.R. 1213. It wasn't just a blank check, Mr. Chairman. It is a series of blank checks, in fact, an infinite number of blank checks that an infinite amount of money could conceivably be written into. That's how bad this is. That's how unquantifiable it is. I know that CBO has attempted to put a number on it, but it requires some assumptions to do that. The 112th Congress has been bound by the 111th Congress with this term we call mandatory spending. I don't concede that there's anything such as mandatory spending in this Congress. No previous Congress can bind a subsequent Congress. This Congress has to approve all spending of every federal dollar before it can be expended, and we need to stand on that principle. And, Mr. Chairman,
additional 30 seconds, gentlemen.
Gentleman's recognized.
I thank Chairman. I thank the gentleman from Texas. This unlimited and mandatory spending is unconstitutional. I'd make the point also that the funding that would go to set up the state exchanges, we need to be very well aware of what that can be. If the states take this free money, so to speak, from this unlimited slush fund of Kathleen Sebelius and set up the state exchanges, even though they believe they have control of these exchanges, it sets them up to be nationalized by a far more powerful federal government. And even though they oppose Obamacare, they might be complicit in its implementation if they accept this money. I urge adoption of H.R. 1213. I thank the gentleman from Texas, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself 30 seconds. I'd just like to point out to the gentleman, 49 states and the District of Columbia, along with 4 territories, have been awarded $54 million in planning grants. So all you're doing here, these exchanges are still going to exist even if this bill passed and became law. All you're doing is taking away the money in almost every case from your own state to try to set up these exchanges and not have it become a national exchange. So, you know, the gentleman can talk all he wants about the funding, but the fact of the matter is it's most likely that his own state is asking for this funding so that they can get these exchanges established. Why do the Republicans want to take the money away from their own states? I yield now a minute and a half to the gentlewoman from the Virgin Islands, Ms. Christensen.
Gentlelady from the Virgin Islands.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, today I rise with great disappointment to speak out against yet another attempt to repeal an affordable care provision that is at the very core of increasing access to health care for the over 30 million uninsured Americans. As my colleague said, almost $54 million in planning grants have been awarded to help 49 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 territories, including $1 million to the Virgin Islands, to create unique state and territorial-based solutions to improve our states' and territories' health insurance markets. We must not repeal this funding as H.R. 1213 would do, because by placing the burden entirely on the already overburdened states, it will make it more difficult for them to establish exchanges, and it will increase the cost of families who are seeking to insure themselves. This is really another effort to get rid of exchanges altogether. In deciding how to vote today, I ask my colleagues to think about all of their constituents who suffer unduly from health conditions that could be prevented or controlled if only they had access to health insurance, preventive care, and treatment. These constituents, our fellow Americans, demand that we stand up and fight for their access to affordable health insurance, as Democrats have always done and are doing today. I urge all of my colleagues to vote against this legislation that would undermine the ability of millions of Americans to have access to health insurance and access to needed health care services. I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I'd like to yield myself 1 minute.
Recognized.
How many times did we hear over the run-up to the passage of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, if you like what you have, you can keep it? It turns out nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, what the real truth is they don't want you to keep your current insurance. Now, we've heard members on the other side of the aisle claim that 2 million fewer people will be enrolled in the exchange and that the bill will increase costs to the employers. So here's some shocking news. These assertions that during the health care debate, many people said repeatedly that under the bill, you'll not be able to keep your health insurance you like, in spite of promises made by the Democrats. People were concerned that the new law would encourage employers to drop health care coverage for workers. In fact, we received some memos to that effect as part of an investigation that then Chairman Waxman actually initiated right after the passage of the bill. But then when trying to pass the bill, the Democrats repeatedly denied those claims. Now they seem to relish the fact that employers will drop coverage, and they actually see it as a negative that 1 million people will continue to have employer-sponsored insurance, the coverage that they precisely wanted to keep. I will reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, can I inquire how much time remains on both sides?
Sure. The gentleman from New Jersey has 17 3/4 minutes. The gentleman from Texas has 15.
Okay, I yield now 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Green.
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank my colleague on the Energy and Commerce Committee for yielding to me. To follow up what my colleague also from Texas on Energy and Commerce talked about employers dropping insurance, that's why we need these insurance exchanges. Even before the Affordable Care Act, employers were dropping insurance for their employees or making it cost prohibitive for them to cover themselves. So that's why we need the exchanges. And here they're defunding it today in H.R. 1213. Would repeal the section of the Affordable Care Act that provides funding for the creation and facilitation of state-based health insurance exchanges. Those are not government exchanges. Those are private sector exchanges. During the health reform debate, the Republicans spent most of their time saying health reform would limit the abilities to tailor their own health care systems. The Affordable Care Act, we ensured states would have the ability to create their own health insurance exchanges, meet the health care needs of their state, and still provide consistent basic health coverage nationally. We provided states with planning grants to come up with proposals on how they'll run their health insurance exchanges, so states will run their own exchanges rather than the federal government doing it. Yet here we are today stripping the ability of the states to run their own health insurance exchanges by eliminating those planning grants. Just another example of the hypocrisy of the Republican Party. This is yet another political messaging by the Republican majority in an attempt to defund health reform. They're playing games with funds dedicated to our states, forcing them to spend their own money when state budgets are already limited. The majority has the wrong priorities, and I think the American people know it. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield myself this time 3 minutes. Mr. Chairman, states are coming to the realization that there is no flexibility in these grants. They're coming to understand that the mere words that a state gets to develop an exchange that fits their individual needs, in fact, just rings hollow. The other side has used the word flexibility as a big bait and switch, as the word just similar to the words of if you like what you have, you can keep it. The authors of the bill praise these words, but they are simply not true. The law clearly puts Washington in control, in firm control, in absolute control of these exchanges. For example, Section 1302, the Secretary will choose the essential benefits that must be paid for by individuals and families in the state exchange. Section 1302 D2, the Secretary will control whether an HSA can be offered. Section 1311H, the Secretary can, by regulation, select the doctors and other health professionals that are allowed to provide care in the exchange plans. As a physician, I find this one of the more chilling provisions in this legislation. Section 1311I, the Secretary decides whether a plan provides linguistically appropriate and culturally sensitive information. If they do not meet the Secretary's approval, they cannot have that plan. Section 1311C1 and Section 1311E, the Secretary determines the process and requirements for certifying whether a plan can be sold in the exchange. Section 1311C1I6, the Secretary can decide when individuals can enroll in the exchange plan. Section 1311D4, the Secretary will judge the adequacy of an exchange Internet website. Section 1311K, the Secretary will determine whether an exchange has established rules that conflict with or prevent the application of regulations promulgated by the Secretary. In other words, not only do they get to make the rules, they get to be the referee. Concerns were raised prior to the passage of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act that the law was designed for employers to drop coverage so Washington would control health care through Obamacare exchanges. Now the other side protests when 1 million people will keep their employer-sponsored insurance because they would rather have them under the direct and absolute control of Washington, D.C. rather than their state capitals. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserved. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself 30 seconds. Again, I don't understand what Dr. Burgess is the point he's trying to make. If we don't have this funding under this bill, states are not going to be able to choose the type of marketplace that is best for their families and businesses. By passing this bill, you take away, ultimately, the state's right to make the decisions about what kind of plans they have and how they want to tailor these plans. All he's doing with this bill is handing it over to the federal government, exactly the opposite of what he is saying. What he is reading is essentially what's going to happen if there is no state exchange and there's a federal exchange. So why deny the states the money when they can tailor the exchange with those grants? I yield now to the gentlewoman from Connecticut, 2 minutes. The gentlewoman is the ranking member on the Labor H Appropriations Subcommittee.
Gentlewoman from Connecticut.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to this attempt to defund one of the central cost-cutting reforms of the Affordable Care Act. Like so much in the majority's budget, this bill takes money out of families' pockets and gives it to the health insurance industry. The exchanges will give all Americans the chance to prosper from what members of Congress and large employers have enjoyed for years: large group rates, lower administrative costs, greater transparency. They also expand choices, giving everyone access to a much fuller range of plans. The exchanges work to create real competition in the health industry and thus drive costs down for everyone. But my colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to place the control again in the hands of the health insurance industry and the insurance companies, given what they're prepared to do in the Republican budget by turning Medicare, ending Medicare, and throwing seniors to the private insurance market. This is in the same vein. This bill wants to eliminate this free market reform, allow insurers to continue to act as monopolies. According to the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, which is independent and bipartisan, nonpartisan, it will knock 2 million people out of the exchanges, increase health insurance premiums, and leave 50,000 more Americans uninsured. In fact, 85% of the so-called savings here comes from cutting off Americans' access to health insurance. This is not the direction we want to go. We want to cover more people, reduce health care costs. This bill raises premiums. It raises the number of uninsured in America. And I urge my colleagues to reject it. And a final point, you know, we in this body are very fortunate. We have health insurance. Our kids have health insurance. And when we get ill, we go to the head of the line, same as our families. Every single time we take to this floor, the majority in this body wants to repeal health care reform, wants to take away the opportunity for millions of Americans to have the same kind of health care coverage that members of Congress and their families have. I yield back.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Gentleman from Texas.
Now, I yield myself 1 minute, Mr. Chairman. I would remind my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that the governor of Utah, coming to our committee hearing, said that he was setting up exchanges prior to the passage of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. The passage of the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act has limited his ability to provide those exchanges. In fact, he went so far as to say now, with the nebulous future surrounding the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act because of activity in the courts, not in the United States House of Representatives, but in the courts. Remember them, the third branch of government that gets to decide if something is constitutional or not. Because of the ambiguity surrounding the cases in the courts, the governor of Utah felt that he could not go forward with the plan that he was implementing, and he worried that the money that he had already spent, his own state's money, on developing state exchanges would now be for naught. He does not know what the rules will be going forward if the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act is allowed to stand, because those rules have yet to be written, those rules have yet to be interpreted. So in a very perverse way, we have made it harder for a state to provide exchanges by passing the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself a minute. You know, I've heard Dr. Burgess talk about governors. I just want to give you some quotes from some governors, Republican governors. Nathan Deal, former member of Energy and Commerce Committee, former chairman of the Health Subcommittee. This is what he said with regard to the state exchanges and the grants. He says, quote, "One of the real problems that some of us as governors foresee is that if the mandates on states remain in place, but the funding from the federal level to carry out those mandates is withheld, that's the worst possible condition that states could be left in." That is exactly what my colleague from Texas is proposing. Have the states will continue to have the mandate to set up the exchange, or without money and therefore not be able to tailor the exchange to the state, or alternatively, letting it go to the federal government, having the federal government run a federal exchange. Nathan Deal, one of our own members, chairman of the subcommittee, said, worst possible scenario. I don't understand, again, I keep saying the same thing, but I have to repeat it, Mr. Chairman. To say that we're going to have state exchanges without having the funding means that the state exchange will either be lousy or it simply won't exist and the federal government takes over. I yield now 2 minutes to the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin, who is the ranking member on the Ways and Means Committee.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Pallone. Thank you for your efforts. You know, I've been listening to the debate here, and the majority, I would describe it this way. You're so single-minded about the health care reform that you really have become mindless. You come here and talk about federal control, but essentially what this bill would do would be to increase it. CBO says, pass this bill, and you'll have more federal control, not less, and less state control. It makes no sense. It's mindless. And you come here and say there's one governor who says something about his exchange, but every state but one has applied for and received a grant for their exchange. It's mindless, your position. My state has already received a grant, the state of Michigan, and they've used it to bring everybody to the table, including private industry, including consumers, hospitals, etc., to develop a plan that's right for our state. It's mindless for you to come here and say you want to pass a bill that withdraws from our states the ability to plan for the health care for our citizens in a way that is helpful to our state. So maybe there'll be a mindless yes vote here. It's happened before. Where are the jobs bills? I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would not presume to put words into the mouth of the governor of Georgia, but I do know from a long association with him that he was very abhorrent of any mandates that were placed on the state. So I do not doubt the fact that he said the worst of all possible worlds would be to get the mandate and not get anything else to help enact that mandate. But to be very clear, the mandates themselves are the anathema. And why would those mandates be a problem for the governor of Georgia or the governor of any other state? Because now the decision-making does not rest with the state. The state is mandated. The state is mandated to set up these exchanges, and yet Health and Human Service Department, the Health and Human Service Secretary, will choose the essential benefits that must be paid for by individuals and their families. That's no longer a state decision. That's no longer a gubernatorial directive. That is now a directive from the Secretary of Health and Human Services. They would also decide whether their plan's provider network is adequate, regardless of whether or not it covers the doctor that you use and you like. The Secretary, not the governor, not the governor's chief of staff, not someone in the state legislature, the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, who has that now unprecedented power and is only limited by her own imagination. The Secretary would impose price controls on health coverage. The Secretary would pick who gets a waiver from the annual limit requirements. The Secretary would establish cost-sharing requirements regardless of their effect on premiums. Not a gubernatorial directive, not something established by the State Commissioner of Insurance, not something contributed to by the governor's chief of staff, not something decided by any state legislature, but by the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. Again, Chairman Upton in his opening remarks said this the spending would only be limited by the imagination, by the limits of the imagination of the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. We know who that is this year. We don't know who that is next year. We certainly do not know who that is in 2 years' time. It is the responsibility of this Congress to exercise the due oversight over these programs. We abdicated that authority. By the forward funding of these programs, as Mr. King pointed out in his remarks, we abdicated that authority. It's now time for Congress to claim that back. That's not mindless. The mindlessness, I might remind the Speaker, the mindlessness was when this bill was passed a year ago without due proper authorization and oversight. And I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I yield myself 1 minute. Again, you know, I listened to the gentlewoman from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, before, and basically she said, we're just going to keep repealing and repealing and repealing. I understand that you want to get rid of the whole bill, but why do you bring up legislation today that, again, I guess you're doing it because you don't want to keep repealing the whole bill over and over again because it becomes ludicrous, so instead you take pieces out, in this case the state exchanges, and you say we're not going to give states the grants to actually follow up. But, you know, if it's obvious when we talked about Nathan Deal, he doesn't like the law. He'd like to see it repealed. But he's saying if you're not going to repeal it, then don't defund it, because then the states can't carry out their functions in an effective way. So all I'm saying to my colleague from Texas is, if you just want to keep repealing and repealing, like Ms. Blackburn said, go ahead and do it. We'll waste time, which doesn't make sense. But if you're going to then take pieces out, then don't say to the states, we're going to defund you and not allow you to do what you're already required to do, or set this over to the federal government. But you see, this is the absurdity of what the other side of the aisle is trying to do. It's just a complete waste of time. I yield now 2 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Miller.
Gentleman from California.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. What is it about the Republican Party that insists that its mandate in Washington, D.C. is to keep the American public away from affordable health care? First, they start by ending Medicare so that senior citizens who retire will have to pay much more for their health care than they would otherwise. Those on Medicare, because they'll be closed in, an aging population, their health care costs will continue to go up in the future, far beyond their ability to pay. They've decided that they're going to raise the price of prescription drugs to senior citizens. They've decided that they're going to decrease the access of young people to health care by not providing for school-based clinics, health care clinics. They've decided they'd roll back pre-existing conditions that prevent women from getting coverage of health care, young children from getting coverage of health care from life-threatening diseases that they were born with. What is it about the Republican Party that they don't want people to have access to health care in this country that's affordable? They don't mind them being in a lottery. If they can find it and afford it, and maybe they can have it. But if they can't, it's tough. So now we come to a time when they said they don't want one-size-fits-all in Washington. The states should have a right to set up the exchanges. The states have an option. They can set up an exchange or not set up an exchange. Some 49 states have stepped forward and said, we want a right to customize the exchange for the purposes of the people we represent, the nature of our state, the economy of our state, the age of our state. We want to do this. And now they're saying, well, that's good, but we're not going to give you any money to plan to do that. And so what are they doing? According to the CBO, they're now threatening once again the access to affordable health care for 50,000 or more Americans. So they've threatened the access to health care for women. They've threatened the access to health care for children. They've threatened the access to health care for seniors. They've threatened the access for those who are about to become seniors. They just can't stop doing this.
Gentlemen, want another
minute? Just 30 seconds.
Additional 30 seconds.
They want to say, well, they're just repealing the health care bill that was passed. They're just repealing that. No, what they're doing is they're standing in the way. The very same rights that they have as members of Congress to have a federally set up exchange for federal employees where policies pass muster that you get real value if you buy one, whether you buy a health savings account or whether you buy a plan for your family or for an individual, you get real value, you get access. The rights they have as members of Congress, once again, they're stepping into the breach to make sure that their constituents won't have that right at the state level. Because when there are no state exchanges, they won't have that right. It's a really strange view of their obligations to the American public, to working families, to children, and to seniors. And it's a real strange view about their position of privilege that they would have all of this for themselves, but not for their constituents.
The gentleman's time's expired. The chair would ask all members to heed the gavel. The gentleman from Texas.
I'm sorry, I missed that last directive from the chair.
I said the chair would ask all members to heed the gavel, and then the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Well, you're very kind, Mr. Chairman. You know, I will direct my remarks to the chair, and not to anyone in particular, as I believe is one of the habits of the House. I'll yield myself 1 minute for this purpose. I was always taught growing up that if you're going to tell a story, you ought to begin it with once upon a time. I think I should have heard a few once upon a times in that last tirade that was just leveled upon the House. You know, their hypocrisy knows no bounds, Mr. Chairman. The other side claims that the health care law is about state flexibility, but they oppose H.R. 1213 because some states might assess a health plan fee to fund the operation of exchanges that the state wants to set up. If you're for flexibility, and then eliminate the complete control that the Secretary has over the state exchanges. Let states establish exchanges without onerous and costly federal mandates and finance them how each state feels is appropriate. Now, to talk about hypocrisy, what the other side fails to mention that under the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, advocates taxing health care plans that sell insurance in the exchanges. Rather than being silent on how states should fund their exchanges once the grant money runs out, the Democrat health care bill actually spells out that the states should consider charging taxes on health insurance premiums for plans sold in the exchange. I yield myself an additional 30 seconds. The hypocrisy could be tolerable if it just simply ended there. However, the other side also fails to mention that the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act directly charges a $60 billion tax on Americans' health insurance premiums in Section 9010, or that it imposes tens of billions of dollars in direct taxes on medical devices and drugs that people will use that will increase their health care premiums, according to the CMS actuary. And I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, can I inquire about the time on both sides?
Gentleman from New Jersey has 7¼ minutes, and the gentleman from Texas has 7½.
I yield now 3 minutes to the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi.
Gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, my friend from New Jersey. This is all about creating a mechanism for competition, fair, open, full disclosed competition. The exchanges actually come from maybe 20 years ago. I know that in California, when I was elected insurance commissioner in 1991, we established an exchange program, passed the legislature. Unfortunately, Governor Wilson vetoed that legislation. Had it gone into place, there would have been a marketplace for insurance consumers. Right now, consumers are at the whims of the market. They have no power. An exchange is simply a way to accumulate the purchasing power of thousands or hundreds of thousands of individuals and small businesses so that their risk is spread out over that large population. Right now, small businesses and individuals simply are at the mercy of the insurance company. They have no way to spread their risk, and therefore their rates are exceedingly high and, in many cases, impossible to get insurance. For the life of me, I do not understand why the Republicans want to repeal the exchanges. I always hear from them competition and free market. This is exactly that. This is competition in which the health insurance companies have to compete with a similar policy, 4 different kinds of policies, a very rich one and a very basic one, and they have to compete on quality. Well, what's the problem with that? And they'll be able to get insurance. Right now they can't. So they're going to repeal it. Makes no sense. Also makes no sense that the Republicans would go out and terminate Medicare. Hello? You're going to terminate Medicare? A guaranteed insurance policy for everyone over 65? Oh, I know. only those who are below 55 years of age will never see Medicare. It's gone. It's history. Oh, you're going to give them a voucher, a small percentage of the total cost, 10 years out? Good luck. And you throw them to the whims of the insurance companies without an exchange. What's this all about? I think Congressman Miller may have had it right. How do you view the world? People need health care. Insurance is a way to get health care, and exchange is a way to spread the risk under for a large pool of people so the risk is there and access to the market. California has an exchange. California last year established a law to put in place an exchange. It was signed by a Republican governor, folks. You listening? Governor Schwarzenegger signed the exchange program. It's going into operation in a year and a half so that people in California can get insurance. 2 million people will not be able to get insurance if this bill were to pass. And the only thing you offer is a termination of Medicare. Oh, and by the way, you're going to reduce Medicaid by $700 billion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back my time.
Gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Chairman, I'll yield myself 1 minute. Although the issue of Medicare is not the subject of this debate today, I can recall a time about 20 years ago when Paul Tsongas, a former senator, came to Dallas to talk to a group called the Dallas Business Group on Health. It was the day after President Clinton had come to this House and addressed a joint session of the House and Senate and unveiled his health care plan in September of 1993. Senator Tsongas came and talked to us in Dallas, and he said it was a beautiful speech. There wasn't a dry eye in the House. The only problem was that the President proposed 5 new entitlement programs, and we cannot pay for the ones that we have. And former Senator Tsongas then went on to articulate how the rate of rise of entitlement spending was going to cripple this country in the future, such that by at some point between 2015 and 2020, this country would see intergenerational conflict, the likes of which it had never seen before. Yes, it is incumbent upon us to recognize that train wreck that is coming and deal with it. Representative Ryan put forward a very thoughtful plan 2 weeks ago. Let's see the plan from the other side. So far, that's been lacking. I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, may I inquire? I have no additional speakers. I don't know if the gentleman has the right to close, correct? How much time do we have, and do I have...
6.5 over here, 4.25 over here.
Are you prepared to close, or do you have any additional speakers?
Well, as enjoyable as this has been with me against the world, I will accept the gentleman's offer to wrap the debate up.
All right.
Gentleman from New Jersey.
I'll yield myself such time as remains, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'm pleased that my colleague on the other side, Dr. Burgess, got up and talked about the Ryan budget, or the Republican budget, I should say, because as far as I know, every Republican voted for it, and most Democrats voted against it. You know, and he also mentioned, I think, President Clinton's efforts to achieve health care reform. You know, the Democrats over the years, Harry Truman, President Clinton, President Obama, have all been reaching out to try to achieve health care reform and find a low-cost way of providing a good benefit package to all Americans. It's sad to think that on the other side of the aisle, when they became the majority, the first thing they did was to pass this Republican budget that actually puts an end to Medicare and really jeopardizes the future of Medicaid as well. I think it says a lot about the fact that the Democrats are trying to expand health care choices and options and provide low-cost health care with good benefit package. The Republicans are taking the plans that exist now, like Medicare and Medicaid, and either ending them in the case of Medicare or in the case of Medicaid, really making it so it's going to be very difficult for Medicaid to continue. We already have in place, as I mentioned in the beginning of this debate, many of the positive aspects of the Affordable Care Act, all those things that eliminate discrimination, let you put your children on your policy, start to plug up the donut hole for prescription drugs for seniors. This is working. This is legislation that's working and making a difference for the American people and making it possible now with these state exchanges, once they're up and running, with the tax credits that are available for even those other 32 or 30 to 40 million Americans who don't have health insurance now to finally have it. Now, why do the Republicans want to eliminate this? I listened to Dr. Burgess. He says it costs too much. Well, the fact of the matter is that the CBO said that the Affordable Care Act was going to save money, reduce the deficit over 10 years. I know they only like to look at the CBO numbers when they think they're beneficial to their point of view, but the fact of the matter is the CBO is a nonpartisan arm of this Congress, and they say that the Affordable Care Act reduces the deficit over 10 years. At the same time, we're covering everyone and we're providing a good benefit package, just like, say, Blue Cross or Blue Shield today. What this bill does is to eliminate choices, because if the states are allowed to tailor a program and an exchange for their own constituents in their state, I believe it'll be more robust, it'll be a better plan tailored to those people from New Jersey in my case, or Texas in the case of Dr. Burgess. By taking away the money for the exchanges, all you're going to do is making that more and more difficult. States will still have to do it, but they won't have a good plan. They may limit their choices. They may not have a lot of choices, which they would have if they have some money to plan and be rational about how this works. And, of course, the more likely scenario is that we'll simply have a federal exchange, and a lot of states will opt out and not even have their own state exchange. I think that would be a mistake to do. I really do. As much as, you know, I'd rather have a federal exchange than no exchange, I do think it makes sense to have state exchanges. So, again, I think that what the Republicans are doing now, and I think that Ms. Blackman said it earlier, she said, we're just going to repeal this, and we're going to take a piece of it and repeal something else until we get rid of the whole thing. Well, don't waste the time of the Congress on doing the same thing over and over again. I was home for the last 2 weeks. We all had a break. We were at home for 2 weeks. All I heard, I didn't hear about health care. I heard about jobs and how the economy was starting to sputter again. You know, the last quarter was not as good as it could have been. And the fact of the matter is that since the Republicans have come into the majority here, they're not doing anything to create jobs. We don't have a bill to create jobs. We keep doing the same thing every day. Today it's going to be defund the health care. Tomorrow it's going to be abortion again. I don't know how many times we're going to have these same bills that come out of our Health Subcommittee and the Energy and Commerce Committee. It is unfortunate. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this bill.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Burgess.
Mr. Chairman, at this point, I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the Chairman Emeritus of the full committee, Mr. Barton of Texas.
Gentleman from Texas.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Burgess. And it's good to see you in the chair there, Mr. Speaker. I feel empowered and confident that you're going to make the right rulings as the day goes on. I would ask to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you. We're going to have more amendments offered on this small part of the repeal effort of the new health care law than the Democratic majority allowed in the last Congress on all the health care legislation that they brought to the floor. After general debate, we're going to have at least 5 amendments that were made in order under the rule. That's 5 more than Speaker Pelosi and then Rules Committee Chairwoman Slaughter made in order in the last Congress when we were debating these issues. Republicans are not necessarily opposed to the concept of these exchanges, Mr. Speaker. What we are opposed to is the process in the last Congress where the actual bill that became law was dumped in the dead of night with no amendments made in order, little debate, and an up or down vote as soon as the Speaker had twisted enough arms on the then majority side of the Democratic Party to move the bill. So we're trying to repeal it piece by piece. Once that's done, then to replace it. This particular bill that's before us is pretty straightforward. It repeals the authority of the Secretary of Health and Human Services to obligate such sums as necessary to fund these exchanges. This such sums as necessary could be $50 million, could be $100 million, could be $200 million, could be $500 million. We just don't know. Those of us on the now majority side, the Republican side, think that's bad management. Such sums is necessary. So we're not really having a debate on whether exchanges are good or bad. I can agree with my friend from New Jersey that in concept exchanges are good. Now, I could have a debate that if you're going to have exchanges, you ought to let the market operate and determine what's offered in the exchanges and not mandate what has to be qualified in order to be a part of the exchange. And we could have a debate on what the premiums are and what the coverage is and whether you allow flexibility or whether you put these federal mandates on what has to be in the health care plan to be a part of the exchange. But that's a different debate. The debate today, Mr. Speaker, is should the Secretary of Health and Human Services have the ability to obligate, without any constraints by the Congress, such sums as necessary to empower and fund these health exchanges? We say no. So we're going to urge a yes vote at the appropriate time so that we can take away that authority, send this bill to the other body, and hopefully have that passed. And then at some point in the future, bring back a reform bill where we have the policy debate, which again, I think you can say that there will be some agreement between the majority and the minority side on the underlying policy. But on the fact that the Secretary of Health and Human Services shouldn't be able just to obligate with no oversight by the Congress how much money goes into creation and maintenance of these exchanges, we think the answer to that is she should not, the current Secretary or any future Secretary should not have that authority, and that's why we put forward the bill. With that, I would yield back the balance, or yield back to Mr. Burgess the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time's expired. Gentleman from Texas.
We'll yield back the balance of our time. Urge an aye vote on the measure.
Gentleman yields back. All time for general debate is expired. Pursuant to the rule, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule and shall be considered read. No amendment to the bill is in order. 70. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report by a member designated in the report, shall be considered read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent of the amendment, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. It is now in order to consider amendment number 1, printed in House Report 112-70. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Texas rise? Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 1, printed in House Report number 112-70, offered by Ms. Jackson Lee of Texas.
Pursuant to House Resolution 236, the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, and a member opposed will each be recognized for 5 minutes, and the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Listening to the general debate, I would have to say that I am concerned and not supportive of this legislation and would hope that we would vote against the underlying bill. But I have an amendment that I believe my colleagues on both sides of the aisle would appreciate, and it's very simple. This amendment will provide the public with important information about mandatory funding to states for health benefit exchanges that will no longer be available for the public and small businesses to use in order to obtain competitive health coverage for their necessary health care. Post the monies that are rescinded and let the public judge for themselves, good health care or not. This particular amendment deals directly with the concern that we don't have the ability to move forward on health exchanges that will help the vast numbers of Americans. For example, the American health benefit exchanges make it easier for small businesses and the public to obtain competitive health insurance on the basis of price quality rather than to be subject to the abuses of insurance companies who would charge exorbitant prohibitive rates. The Health Insurance Exchange Program is a key element of the Affordable Care Act aimed at providing coverage to the uninsured. 6.2 million residents in my home state of Texas do not have health care insurance. Of the 26% of the Texas population that is uninsured, 18% are children. Insurance exchanges would also be available to small businesses with fewer than 100 employees. Texas is home to nearly 400,000 small businesses employing less than 500 people and nearly 2 million self-employed entrepreneurs. Letting everyone know that we're making a good dent at the deficit, of which we can do in many, many other ways, will also show them why I don't have good health care, meaning why don't small businesses and farmers. So at this time, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that my colleagues support an amendment that is transparent to let you know what the savings are, but what's the question? What's happening to the accelerating rate of health care and the sick people who are getting sicker? With that, I reserve my time.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Texas, for what purpose do you rise?
Mr. Chairman, I rise in opposition to the amendment. Now,
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the Chair. I supported